Welcome to this afternoon's work session. First order of business is if any commissioner would like to take any of the items from the agenda to discuss prior to this evening's meeting. Commissioner Hambrick, any items you'd like to take prior to?
Oh, no.
Commissioner Anderson, you good?
I'm good.
All right, well, let's go into our presentation, population and employment projections for impact fee ordinance. Chief Burks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Hambrick. Coming up this evening is Lee Walton. Lee is our consultant with WSP who is doing the groundwork to create the methodology study for the impact fee ordinance, and is also working with Sizemore and Sycamore on the comp plan, as those two projects will run intertwined here very shortly. So what he's coming before you to present tonight is the population and economic forecast for the county that have to be a part of not only the impact fee methodology study, but also the comp plan. There were some differences in what ARC's numbers were and what our internals were. So our internal numbers paint the county in a much more positive light from a population and economic standpoint than ARC, but I'll let Lee get into that. So what he will present tonight will be what we will present as a part of both projects moving forward, unless we receive some other direction from the board. So with that, I'll yield the floor to Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Murkison. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We, as you're aware, have been underway preparing the impact fee study. Over the summer, as we were working on our analysis, we learned of the selection of a consultant to begin preparation of the comprehensive plan update. And after those, Sizemore Group is that group, as you're aware, I'm sure. So after cleared to do so by the Community Development Department, Mr. G. James Brooks, we initiated some meetings and discussions about the population and employment projections in effort to coordinate those among those two processes. From previous impact fee efforts in different counties, we have found that it's very important to have a very consistent message and documentation of population and employment projections in the comprehensive plan and the impact fee study and the capital improvements element of the impact fee study, which is effectively a part of a comprehensive plan. Usually these things aren't done at the same time, but as schedules have coordinated here, they are. So we took a bit of an extra step in the process to have a series of meetings to produce a technical memo, which has the small print and the small tables. I think that's in front of you. I've put together the one-page summary with the larger print and the summary points and the key figures for purpose of this briefing, but I'll be glad to go into details if you'd like. So the bottom line is it's very important to have these coordinated, and as staff and consultants, we're in that process. We have agreed as staff and consultants for the two processes to present consistently forecast out to the year 2050. And you're going to say, as I say, wow, that seems like a long time away. But the reality is that's just a bit over 25 years from now. And this is all about long-range planning. So looking out to 2050 is appropriate. If you look at the details of the memo, you'll see that we show projections for every 5-year increment, basically leading up to 2050. So that's one point as recommendation and an agreement among our two staffs and processes to do that. And then there are two categories of forecasts that are particularly important. Population forecast, the total population of the county, and here we're talking countywide, including municipalities, and employment forecasts. And as we got deeper into the weeds, we found discrepancies between what we typically take as a method for creating these forecasts and what ARC has shown for their forecasts. And those have to do with when ARC prepared those forecasts and also the methods used. With population forecasts, we're pretty close, looking out to 2050. Our method, which is based on the rate of growth the county has experienced year to year since 2010, we project that forward, and we get to a 2050 population forecast or projection of almost 412,000 total people. ARC for the same 2050 shows a population forecast of 393,100. That ARC forecast was developed in 2020, so it's not as current as what we've done. And perhaps slightly different methodology was used than what we use. And I can go into the methodology again. That's a part of the longer memo. But we recommend, based on our understanding of the county's stance regarding growth, encouraging redevelopment, Hartsfield Airport growth, interstate corridors, et cetera, you're in a growth center. So we feel that the slightly higher future population forecast is appropriate. When we get to employment, we were actually surprised as we looked at the numbers currently published by ARC at how low they are compared to some other options. And there's a number of reasons for that, but as you see in the summary here, we're recommending a total employment forecast of almost 285,000 jobs for 2050. And we call that a total employment forecast, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Comparatively, what ARC currently has published is a employment forecast of almost 168,000 for the same. So that's a big delta. So we got in touch with ARC, talked about that, understood from them that they consider that to be somewhat outdated, more outdated than the population forecast. They're going to go through a process of updating it. Also, that is based on more of a number of people with jobs as opposed to the total number of jobs. The approach that we recommend uses Woods and Pool economic forecasting as the basis, and they provide these economic forecasts nationwide. They count the total number of jobs which recognize in the county, which recognizes that many people hold more than one job. So when you're talking about the amount of employment in a county, I think we probably all know people who hold multiple jobs in different ways. So they take that into account as well as some other factors, which gives us what we feel is truly a representation of total employment. The ARC numbers and numbers from BLS comparatively seem to discount that. And in a county where there aren't many people that hold multiple jobs, those forecasts might be more accurate. We kind of feel that Clayton County is a situation where there are quite a number of people who hold more than one job. So we think that the Woods and Pool forecast method is more accurate and appropriate here. And again, similar factors in terms of your stance on economic development, promoting growth, promoting economic development essentially, and the factors that support economic development. So all that said, we would like to, we wanted to present to you those recommendations after we work through the process of coordinating those among the impact fee study and the comprehensive plan, and suggest moving forward with both processes based on those population and employment forecasts. They are particularly important for the impact fee study because those projections get disaggregated into the different service areas that we're looking at, projections for those service areas, which ultimately funnel into what we're able to recommend statistically as maximum impact fee levels for the different types of services that we're talking about. They're also important for the comprehensive plan. I won't speak for the comprehensive plan team in that respect, but as I've prepared comprehensive plans in the past, we certainly look at the population forecast growth and design a land use approach that will accommodate that. So I would think that that would be the case here as well. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Are there any questions? Commissioner
Okay,
Hambrick. Go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned several times regarding ARC
Yes, ma'am.
and Hartsfield-Jackson as being a catalyst for some of these reports and all. But the thing that bothers me is that we rely on ARC for a lot of things. We get grant funding and all that, and if their numbers are that low, then we are probably getting inaccurate information or funding from them. So how do we correct that?
I would believe that it's more the case that your funding allocations are tied to census data.
Yep.
Census counts, census estimates.
Not all the time with ARC.
Not
They
all the
come up
time with
different-
ARC?
no, They come
Okay.
up with different funding. We get funding for senior services
Okay.
and different departments and all use ARC. So it's not just the census.
All right.
So, Commissioner, to help answer that, part of the beauty of these processes merging like they did, and we would like to be able to claim credit for it, but it was an accident that these two ran the way they did. But
Good thing.
since we were able to sit down with the comprehensive plan, the impact fee study team, and the Atlanta Regional Commission, we believe now that all three parties are like-minded into how we should arrive at these population and economic forecasts. And then we're moving forward with what is now the readily accepted numbers. So hopefully now this has got our projections settled out to 2050.
Oh.
So if there are some grant-funded opportunities that are derivative of these numbers, then we just corrected your concern.
Okay, great. I hope they were listening.
Is that fair?
That is fair. And so both impact fee study, the capital improvements element, and the comprehensive plan, once they're drafted, they will be sent to ARC, basically as an expression of, from Clayton County to ARC, this is our plan. This is our assessment. These are our recommendations, policies, and so forth. ARC will have the opportunity to review that and comment on it, as will the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. But you have the authority as a measure of the whole home rule process to direct planning and zoning for Clayton County. So if you assert these are our projections, it's kind of their obligation to consider those, respect those, and factor them into their future projections.
Okay, so how did Woods and Poole fit in? Did you all use them, or were you all working together?
We use them. Woods and Poole is an economic forecasting agency. Effectively, they develop huge models and develop projections really based on census statistics at the core, and then they turn those into projections, other counts, et cetera. That's, the demographic analysis they do is a very high level. So we subscribe to the data profiles that they produce. They produced one very recently for Clayton County and other counties in Georgia. So we took the data that they prepared, analyzed it, assessed it, and then discussed it with ARC. ARC agrees that Woods and Poole is a valid economic projection.
Would they be using them in the future?
They take a different approach. They don't seek to necessarily count every job. They're more reporting employment, and it's based more on a share of a larger region. So we feel that Woods and Poole does a better job at the local level and more accurately reflects the reality of Clayton County.
Okay, maybe you can help us, Chairman. Aren't you on that board?
I sure am.
Okay, you can help us to get them to see.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
As we compare those fees, we want businesses to come to Clayton County, but we want to make sure that our fees are comparable with other counties. So how are we going to make sure that we keep them at a level where our businesses don't consider neighboring counties versus us?
Yes, ma'am. So what WSP will do for us is, as they come back with the methodology study, that's the biggest thing that they're working on right now. So they'll come back with a range of fee options, right? And that will be driven based off the service categories that the board laid out in our previous meetings that we wanted to focus on as far as what these fees would go to support from infrastructure, parks, fire, police, transportation, et cetera. So they will come back with a range of, based off of population economic forecast, all of the other data, our service needs, our facility master plans, all of the data that they've analyzed, they will come back with a recommended range. Along with that will be what every neighboring jurisdiction around us charges for like fees or like construction, whether it's high-rise, single-family, commercial, whatever. That's when the board can make a determination, where do you want to land from a fee structure standpoint. Atlanta just went through a revision. I think they did a 3-year phased approach where they implemented their fees. Some of them went up substantially, like per room hotel costs. So there's several different ways we can go about it. That's our next, I think that's our next large presentation, will be that study.
Okay.
And that's where we will get direction from the board as, here's the range, here's our neighboring, where do you want to land?
One thing I'd add to that is that's part of the role of the advisory committee as well, is for them to be a sounding board. We'll present to them what all the numbers and equations add up to as a maximum justifiable impact fee level for Clayton County, and then we'll talk a lot about comparisons with other counties, what other counties are doing, what they're seeking to fund, what their impact fee levels are. In addition to Atlanta, we've got very recent information from Henry County, from Spalding County, some nearby counties, Fayette, that have impact fee programs in place, what they're charging, and also what they adopted as their impact fees relative to what they could have been justified to adopt. It's almost always less.
And we'll look at those impact fees on a, did you say 3-year basis, or how often will we look at it?
Once, if you choose to adopt and establish an impact fee program after this study is complete based on its recommendations, once it's approved and set up, you're able to adjust the fee levels anytime you want to by appropriate board process and board action. So it's not quite as simple as a lever that you can push up and down, but it approaches that. That's the intent, is that circumstances change from time to time, and it's appropriate sometimes to adjust fees. And so it's not a terribly difficult process to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman. Go ahead, Commissioner Davis.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, kind of a joint question on the population forecasting.
Sure.
I understand you really forecast that residential portion. Did you forecast the commercial portion as well? And I asked that from going into the next part of the question on the employment forecasting. What are the top sectors or segments that you can forecast seeing coming into this county and or leaving this county?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the commercial forecast in these terms is the employment forecast. It's people, population, and it's jobs, employment. So at the demographic level, we're really taking trends and assessing them with the census data and estimates that we have, and then we're projecting forward. And there's different models, and if you look at the memo, you'll see different options, different ways of looking at it. When it comes to the employment factors, because this is county-wide, we do break it. Woods and Pool, again, is the provider of the data and the forecast in this case, based on their model and their publications. And so table A4 in the memo that you have, it's on the 4th page, it does break down the total employment overall estimate into different industries. So you can look through there. It doesn't break it down to the full level that your economic development department might do in their day-to-day analysis, but it does a pretty good job distinguishing between government jobs, private sector jobs, and then within private sectors sub-aggregating and looking at manufacturing, wholesale, transportation, real estate, professional services, et cetera. So there's a good number of categories in there, and you can look for each year from 2023 through 2050 on the 5-year increments and see what the projected numbers of jobs are.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I would love to see, and granted, I don't know if it's part of the project, but to see some, the sub-aggregates of some of these, like manufacturing. We know the traditional form of warehousing is on its way out, and there's
Right.
a new form of warehousing coming in. And I asked those questions to say, how do we begin to prepare those from a housing to a workforce development standpoint to begin to ready ourselves for that? So
That's a very good question. And in terms of total projected job growth, the greatest number projected increase in jobs is in the transportation and warehousing sector.
exactly.
Whereas manufacturing is projected, again, by Woods and Poole over that time period, to lose some jobs. So you can start to, this is a starting point to inform planners and economic developers, and then you go from there.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hamburg.
Well, and I think you all have touched on that, but you mentioned Atlanta and comparing those,
Impact fees.
yes,
Impact.
comparing those impact fees, but I would think we would go with some of the counties comparative to us in size and probably demographics and all too, so.
Yes, ma'am. No, the reference to Atlanta was more just central around who's recently gone through an update of their impact fee ordinance. But no, when we look at it, we look at counties similar in size, similar in demographics. What is it that where are we in our development processes versus where are other agencies? But we'll look at, the beauty is pretty much everybody around us has an impact fee program. So there's plenty to look at and try to figure out what different agencies are charging. And every time fees are done, they're looking at everybody else too, because obviously they're not trying to drive development out. But as we see from everything that's going on around us, it's not slowing down, and they're paying it hand over fist. So we'll take all that into consideration, and when this comes back before the board for y'all to make a decision, it'll be well laid out as to who's doing what and where and how.
And I can only imagine that some of this can will be defined even more so as we undergo our comprehensive plan at the 5, 10, 15, 20 years or so. As we project our vision and direction for the county, then that forecasting can really become more clear.
That's right.
So I appreciate the work that y'all are doing in this area. Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation, sir. Chief?
I saw the look. I recognized the look.
Don't encourage her, Chief.
No, a timeline that I'm thinking of, you say another report and also.
Oh, for the methodology study?
Right, so what are the steps?
Absolutely. So moving ahead, now that the comprehensive plan is underway, we're coordinating with it as it goes through the process. So between now and the end of the year, we'll be getting back together with the advisory committee, beginning the discussion about maximum fee schedule and comparative analysis with other counties, and then moving into early next year, sort of in lockstep with the comprehensive plan, we'll be pulling together documentation and the capital improvements element, which is a piece of the comprehensive plan, so that it's ready at the time the draft comprehensive plan is ready, and then you'll have processes of review leading up to adoption next year.
Okay, so I'm thinking probably the latter part of next year that these plans can be implemented, or will it be like 25?
With the impact fee, you'll have the option. I believe the comprehensive plan adoption deadline is in the fall of next year.
Okay.
With the impact fee, you should have the option of either adopting that at the same time, or depending on the review processes, you could push that ahead by a few months and potentially adopt it earlier.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Okay, look at you.
Anybody?
No questions, but one request. It will be key that your appointees to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee are present, so if you could encourage them to make sure that we get their input, because that's going to be key in developing what we bring back to you
How
all
often
as a
are they meeting?
recommendation.
Is it once a month or what?
No, sir. I think they've got them together once, just to get them acclimated. We don't take a lot of their time, but
And to clarify as well, if you were to reach out to them, we have not been in touch with them asking them to meet while we've been doing this initial coordination of the two processes, but we will be reaching out to them with an update with this information and a heads up about an upcoming meeting before the end of the year.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, no other questions. We stand adjourned until 6:30. Thank you.